When people turn to telehealth for weight loss, they're looking for real support. That's why more people are choosing OrderlyMeds.com. Orderly Meds connects you with real doctors and access to proven GLP-1 medications like semaglutide and tirzepatide. No guessing, just a more supportive experience, and all shipped directly to your door in discreet packaging. Do your research, ask questions, then visit OrderlyMeds.com/podcast for an exclusive offer. That's OrderlyMeds.com/podcast. Individual results may vary. Not medical advice. Eligibility required. See site for details.
He's a former police officer that had 4 officers killed in a line of duty. And he's here to share his interesting and often unspoken about connection with. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. If you're on the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app, be sure to look for me and follow me. My name's John, the letter J, Wiley, W-I-L-E-Y. You can also search for @LET Radio Show. That's John J. Wiley, W-I-L-E-Y, @LET Radio Show on the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app. Calling us from Florida, we have Gary Parrish on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Gary is a former Prince George's County, Maryland police officer. He spent about 10 years there. He specialized in doing background investigations, left the agency. He works in many different things now, but one of the things he really works at, and he'll talk to you about much later on, is HD Barcode LLC and HD Life Preserver for First Responders. Their website is hdbarcode.com. Gary, thanks for your service, and thanks for talking about it on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show.
Well, thank you very much for having me on and the opportunity to hopefully we can help officers in the long run as they're saving their life.
It's really about everybody else, because to do an education very quickly, there's about 1 million police officers in the United States. Mm-hmm. And we broadcast every week to 48 million combined U.S. population. So the vast majority of people are user consumers, regular people, and they want to hear stories. And that's what we're focused on. And here's a story that we almost never get to hear about. You specialize in background investigations for those who want to be officers of your agency.
That is correct.
And how long did you do that?
It was a TDY assignment from the Detective Bureau into the Personnel Division. That the officers the detectives would do backgrounds on various individuals applying, and I did that for about a year and a half.
I remember back in my days in the academy, we started, I think, the academy class with about 55. We graduated 22. People were being yanked out almost daily because of something that came out of the background investigation. And a lot of people, to this day, we don't know what they were.
Yeah, we actually did it a little bit different. We took, the county actually did the background investigations first. So I was assigned to do the background, and that was a pretty intense background investigation at the time. Everything going from the elementary school teachers to the parents, to the grandparents, to the church, synagogue, wherever it may be, we would take a look at that and discuss their background, any issues, any problems, or how great they did in school, look at their grades if they were in the military, look at their DD-214s, get full information, and then if they came from another area, we would go to that area or contact that area, whether it was Baltimore City or Ohio State or New York State, and ask for help in doing the background investigation to get a complete background on an individual. Back then, which they don't do now, they also used to do polygraphs. Uh-huh. And the polygraphs were taken before entry into the academy based on any information that might be a problem, like use of drugs or any kind of previous misdemeanors or arrests, and wanted to get information about that person. So I usually would sit on the outside of the where it was being done, and then watch how the person reacted to the different questions.
How long did you do this? What years?
This was done originally. I did it in 1980. sorry about that. Let me go back to look at my notes here. It was probably in 77, 78.
Things have changed quite a bit. And back in my day,
they don't even use the officers anymore to do backgrounds. They hire outside services.
We had the background investigation. And I always say this to people. If you think that we do a lousy job, you go ahead. You get hired. Just making it in the academy is tough enough. Passing the background investigation is no walk in the park. Secondly, getting through the academy is really difficult.
Yeah, and it really a lot depends on the department and the academy or the agency that you're going through. Some would come from different cities, which would have they would pay to have them go to an academy like ours in Prince George's County. Others would do just a short hire from a short academy of a few weeks. Ours was like almost 6 months. Yeah,
ours was about 6 months as well. And you were a police officer. You were a sworn employee. You didn't get the blues and the gun until the end of your academy stint. And 6 months. And here's the other thing that I get, and I'd love to get your feedback on this. People say, "Oh, our police need more training." Like, okay. They have about 6 months at the academy, and they go through 40 hours a week of training, and most of that is not self-defense. Most of it is not handguns. Most of it's law and patrol and policies and procedures and all that stuff. Then they have a yearly in-service training of one week in Maryland is what we had, and 4 days of that was classroom, and every day we had roll call training. So where is this time for extra training coming from?
Well, the other part you got to look at, once you got graduated, if you graduated, and of course there was a process of going through not only the academic side of it, but you had to do the physical side.
Right.
And stay in shape. And back then the requirements were a lot tighter. It's about height, weight, capabilities than they are now. And I think in the courts they kind of knocked that out, saying that didn't affect the job. But I guess the people in the court never went into a bar fight at
No, they didn't. And it's easy to sit there from the safety of your office where the most dangerous thing you encounter is a rusty paperclip.
Yeah, it's a big difference. And, and after that, we were assigned to a field training officer, FTO, for almost probably another 6 months. So it wasn't even like you got to go out and do it on your own. And usually the field training officer was a very experienced officer and with high qualifications, and he would, give you the background. Of course, a lot of them would joke about, now forget everything you learned in the academy.
Yep,
this is the real world.
That's the first thing I was taught.
Yeah, that's not unusual.
And the second thing was, and this seems to be universal with police, is every now and then my field training officer would yell out, "Where are we?" And I would have to tell him, he'd say, because if I was shot somewhere and you didn't know where we were, you'd be no help to me.
Yeah, I find that nowadays, and I still am involved with working with the Prince George's County Police, and as a former officer, that it is always family. It's sort of like the military.
Right.
Whether it's your department or another, it's still family, and you worry about the men and women involved in that job. It is a dangerous job. And you go there, and I look at it now, and working with the different stations, and the difference comes in as I look at it now in the backgrounds and all. You get policy changes, you get legal actions, and that affects who can be hired and their backgrounds. And I see a lot of them getting in trouble with being arrested for different things, whether it's theft or other things that they shouldn't be doing, and it concerns me.
Right. Well, and we will have that conversation. They're back in the day. Our careers overlapped. I started in the academy in 1980, and I was retired in February of 92 due to injuries. So, but there was two things that they said would ruin the career of almost any police, no matter where they were in the state of Maryland. It was women and booze.
And that seemed to be a lot of, And
there was a lot of guys that got hung up on that. I mean, for goodness sakes.
It's very easy to get hung up. We of course, every department has a nickname for runners or, chasers or whatever they want to call them.
Right.
I used to tell the guys that were coming on the department this was going to be an issue. I said, you're going to go into a job that you're wearing a uniform, that you're identifiable. You're one of the few in the government that's identifiable that you work for the government. You got that uniform on, you got authority, and you're going to have people think of you like in the movies, like a John Wayne image.
Yeah, which you're not.
That you're which you're not.
Let's take a short break on that note.
You have to be aware that they think that, and they think they're going to be getting somebody that's perfect, and
you're not. We're going to return our conversation with Gary Parrish in just a few moments. He's a former Prince George's County, Maryland police officer, and he's heavily involved in a company that's HD Barcode LLC, an HD life preserver for first responders. Their website is hdbarcode.com. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
I try to start my day every day with rooms on the Clubhouse audio app that is free. Think of the Clubhouse app as your own talk radio station, and best of all, it is free. And make sure that after you download the Clubhouse app that you follow John J. Wiley or look for @LET Radio Show. That's the free Clubhouse app, and follow John J. Wiley or look for @LET Radio Show.
Are you trying to get weight loss support through telehealth, but it feels overwhelming and rushed? Check out orderlymeds.com now. Orderlymeds.com was built to be different. Here, you connect with real doctors who take the time to understand your goals, review your eligibility, and guide you through a plan that's right for you. Orderly Meds provides access to proven GLP-1 medications like semaglutide and tirzepatide, including both name brand options and personalized compound versions when appropriate. So you have choices backed by clinical oversight, not guesswork. It's a simpler, more supportive telehealth experience designed around people who want clarity, care, and confidence in their weight loss journey. And your medication is delivered directly to your home in discreet packaging, so your experience stays private from start to finish. Do your research, ask the right questions, then visit orderlymeds.com/podcast for an exclusive offer. Again, that's orderlymeds.com/podcast. Individual results may vary, not medical advice. Eligibility required. See site for details.
Return our conversation with Gary Parrish on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Gary is a former Prince George's County, Maryland police officer. PG County, we called it back in the day, and still do. A lot of people do. It's on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., and it's the dividing line from Southern Maryland and Central Maryland. I'll put it that way. And he did background investigations for that agency for quite a long time, and he left there for about 10 years. He's heavily involved in a company that, I'll just say what it is, HD Barcode LLC, an HD life preserver for first responders. The website is hdbarcode.com. That's hdbarcode.com. Check it out, and you might want to insist on having that for your first responders as well. Gary, the whole thing with the background investigations, and I remember there was a time where maybe I was still in the job, and people were like, well, what's your background investigation like? I don't hear that being talked about too much anymore.
No, I am surprised that it's not. I think they do it entirely different. It may be due to different legal actions that occurred over the years within the government that they what they're limited to do, or maybe for a while they couldn't get enough people on board, so you had to change the standards to get the people to wear the uniform.
I think that's part of the latter, and people say, they love to say very conveniently, very easily, lowering the standards. Listen, it's a tough occupation, and it's tough to find the best of the best. They're going to work rotating shifts, rotating days off. They're going to be called every name in the book. They can be killed, they can be injured, they can be sued, they can be arrested, all that stuff. And by the way, we want you to speak a language. We want you to have a college degree. We want you to be a military veteran, and you've got other options as well. They probably pay more.
Absolutely, and you have competing departments. I just saw recently on LinkedIn that department in California was offering a starting pay that was twice as much as out in the.
Don't even start me on that, because when we started, this is back in your day. We started at $13,280 a year. I couldn't afford an apartment by myself. We were so poor we couldn't afford the R.
Yeah, and that was the regular. The nice part about at least Prince George's County at the time was, and I think they still can do it, is they could assign and work part-time for jobs and raise enough money to live.
I look at the salaries now, and I don't want to sound like sour grapes, and I'm glad they're getting it, but when I got promoted sergeant, I was making the most I've made in policing. It's still not what a police officer makes, not even close.
No. Now, I know the other issues that come in, I think in the state of Maryland, they also ran into a problem with some of the officers have to have their own insurance for liability. Yeah. And I couldn't understand that, and I still don't understand that. I mean, until you go out there on the street. And I worked basically in minority areas the whole time. And the interesting part, I look at some of the officers now, and I concerned, with of course, we'll talk about the officers that I did backgrounds on and that were killed in the line of duty. But I had an incident where I was working part-time at a drug distributor on Southern Avenue, which is on the Maryland side. In the middle of the street is on the Washington, D.C. side. And, of course, across the street is Washington, D.C. Well, back then there were riots going on and insurrections going on, and I was working part-time, going to college at night and not in uniform and walking on the sidewalk on the Maryland side to protect the people leaving from work. And I was attacked by a person that thought that Caucasians were devils. He just got out of St. Elizabeth's Mental Institution. Was high on
good
heroin.
Old St. Elizabeth. Remember that back in the day?
Oh, yeah. And so, he came at me and put his hand behind his back, and I drew my weapon, which you carry off, all the time. And it was back then. It was an old lead ball, 38 short nose Smith & Wesson.
Right.
And he tried to grab it, and I can tell you what happens when you try to grab a gun. It generally goes off, but it went through his chest and mostly on the shoulder side, and we were fighting in the middle of the street of Washington, D.C. And there's blood, and and the adrenaline's going. You don't know if you're shot or they're shot.
No, right. And that's
you're
the
fighting with a
standard
gun in
joke.
between you, and I finally started to get the best of it. I was bringing it back over to the Maryland side, and the crowd's gathering around, with all the problems going on. And the best thing I learned from that whole incident, because I called it Signal 13, which is an officer in trouble, and for the people at the company, and there was a bunch of kids standing around, and they said, "Hey, that's Officer Parrish. He plays ball with us on the side lot.
Right.
We know him.
Yeah.
We don't know the guy who's on the ground." And nobody had what's the problem. And I watch a lot of these guys nowadays. They stay in the cruisers, and they don't get out and learn the neighborhood.
That's the thing that, Gary, back in the day, we didn't do that. As a matter of fact, we got chewed out by the so-called old-timers if you were that kind of police. And by the way, when it came to policing, you had police officers, real police, or good cops back up. Then you had mobile report takers. They were the one the windows rolled up, and they were the last ones to show up on a hot call if they did.
Yeah, you knew those guys, too. I knew them.
And they never got blood on their uniform. They never got IID numbers. And they're first ones promoted. And they're first ones passing judgment on real police.
Yeah, and I knew those guys too, and that was always a problem. But usually, if you had a good squad and that you work with, when the cavalry starts coming, they come quickly, and they did. But I really didn't have a problem other than I had a problem. You have to go before a review board, which I'm sure you would know from shooting somebody. And my former captain, when I worked in the watch commander's office, was the head of the review board. And he said, "Well, Officer Parrish, you were in Washington, D.C. You left Maryland with this in the fight, and you brought him back so he could get medical treatment. Is that correct?" Being a young officer back then, you look at that and how the department watched out and the guys watch out for you. Nowadays, I can't say that's always true.
No, here's the one thing, and I'll phrase this as a form of question. There's sometimes I miss policing. I look and say, man, I could do that. And then I realize it's a younger, I say man or woman. It's a younger person's job. And I did my time. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah, I don't know if you remember chasing people.
Oh, yes, I do. Still do.
I worked on the TAC squad, or the Special Operations Squad. For a while, we worked at the Capitol Center, and there was a guy on the roof of the Capitol Center running around during, I think it was Muhammad Ali fight or something. And they told me to go up there and get him off. I mean, that's not an old guy's job.
That's what they listen. One of the hardest jobs I had to learn, and I had old timers. And when I say old timers, a lot of the, and I'm sure it's the same way at PG County at the time, a lot of the experienced officers were Vietnam combat veterans, and we had a few command staff that were Korean War veterans, and they didn't play. They didn't play when it came to respect. But one of the things they said was, if you get in a foot pursuit, shut the you-know-what up, because no one can understand you. So stop, and all you do is get yourself out of breath. Just keep the guy in sight, and when you can't see him anymore, he's probably hiding somewhere. Gary, can you relate to any of that?
Oh, Absolutely. In fact, we had to be a little careful when I was working on the street and we were doing a search warrant or something. If I had guys that came from the military, especially the Marine Corps, they followed directions very exactly.
Oh, exactly. To the letter.
If you say go in and find it or break this up, then they did exactly what you said.
Don't use the word break. We're talking with Gary Parrish. He is a former Prince George's County, Maryland police officer. Did 10 years and left, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. He did background investigations. Those officers that were killed in line of duty, which we will talk about in a few moments. He's a representative for HD Barcode LLC and HD Life Preserver for first responders. Their website is hdbarcode.com. That's hdbarcode.com. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere, I promise you. We'll be right back.
They say that it's not about how much you earn, it's about how much you save. And that is partially true. If you can take some of that savings and turn it into high-yield investments, you are way ahead of the game. Get more details on how you can get started at letsavings.com, letsavings.com. Again, that's letsavings.com.
Are you trying to get weight loss support through telehealth, but it feels overwhelming and rushed? Check out orderlymeds.com now. Orderlymeds.com was built to be different. Here, you connect with real doctors who take the time to understand your goals, review your eligibility, and guide you through a plan that's right for you. Orderly Meds provides access to proven GLP-1 medications like semaglutide and tirzepatide, including both name brand options and personalized compound versions when appropriate. So you have choices backed by clinical oversight, not guesswork. It's a simpler, more supportive telehealth experience designed around people who want clarity, care, and confidence in their weight loss journey. And your medication is delivered directly to your home in discreet packaging, so your experience stays private from start to finish. Do your research, ask the right questions, then visit orderlymeds.com/podcast for an exclusive offer. Again, that's orderlymeds.com/podcast. Individual results may vary, not medical advice. Eligibility required. See site for details.
During a conversation with Gary Parrish on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Gary is a former Prince George's County, Maryland police officer, did 10 years and left. He did a lot of background investigations. We'll talk about it in a few moments, and some of those officers were killed in the line of duty, which we'll definitely talk about. He is a representative for HD Barcode LLC and HD Life Preserver for first responders. Their website is hdbarcode.com. That's hdbarcode.com. Background investigations, I really don't get. I remember being a young kid going through and having, a disagreement with my soon-to-be background investigator, and he's like, it was over polygraph, and he's like, okay, we'll hire you. I'm like, oh, I'm hired? What do you mean? And then I was like, oh my goodness, am I tough enough? Am I smart enough? Am I resilient enough to handle being a Baltimore police officer? I didn't know. But I still to this day really don't comprehend what those guys, the background investigators, did.
Yeah, no, it is quite intensive and, detailed. I have a funny story to begin with. As a background investigator sitting in the office, there was 5 of us that did the backgrounds for both lateral transfers and new applicants. And we had a secretary, Zona Brown, and Zona actually got married to a captain, but Zona would be listening to a interview. My desk was right by her, and she'd listen to the person talk for a while and on the initial interview and leave. And then the person would leave, and she come back and say, well, he's an Aries, or he's a Cancer, he's a Scorpio. She was never wrong.
Uh-huh.
I thought that was really amazing that she could pick out from an interview.
Because I can't. I put no credence in that, but some people can.
I don't either, but she never missed. And I go like, that's really something. But in the interviews, it was very different. And looking at an officer from a lateral transfer who was already a police officer, who knew the ins and outs, a lot of them, of the interview and what was going to go through and what would happen, and whether he, the polygraph, or I had a couple issues with one coming from another department was a quarter-inch short back then. You had to be 5'10".
Uh-huh.
And my lieutenant at the time said, well, doesn't qualify. My other investigator was quite qualified, said, take him over to our county doctor and take him in the morning. And he'll meet the 5'10" qualifications, and he did. He ended up being a captain and retired
Isn't that funny?
in the department.
Here's the thing. I'd love to tell you that there are books written about this stuff, how to get the ace the interview and all that stuff. And to this day, I still don't know.
I think the easiest part is be personable, be honest, understand that all of us have shortcomings, and had to go through. And, I can't speak for now, but one of the nice parts about this was the department, if you stayed on, paid for your college education if you didn't have one. And they offered classes because we worked 3 different shifts, which was a nightmare, for 7 days on, 2 days off, 7 on, 2 days off at different times. But they would let you do the classes in the morning or in the evening from the University of Maryland through the University College at the Academy, which was really nice. And I don't think they offer that now. You had to stay on to match the amount of time that you were officer to the education was paid for. But it makes it nice. I've got my degree from the University of Maryland, and it helps a lot to these officers, and it helps them in understanding and being better officers too, and going into class and with other people outside of that. So in the applicant side, the lateral transfers created a lot of problems within our department. And you're probably going to ask why.
Right.
Why would that be a problem? Well, because they were offering lateral transfers at the same rank.
That was unheard of. I didn't hear anywhere else. Maybe California's the only place I've heard of. Other than that,
well, we had a problem that we ran into with the Justice Department back then. It occurred. It was kind of unique. Prince George's County was kind of unique in the nation, and the fact after the riots occurred. And a lot of Washington, their residents and buildings and stores got burned down. They moved to the next affordable county, which was Prince George.
Right.
Virginia was too expensive. Montgomery's too expensive. So the population shift in like 3 years.
Right. It changed dramatically.
So you have a population now of probably 95% Caucasian officers and a 50-50 minority population who didn't understand or didn't appreciate the difference in cultures. And there is a difference.
The DOJ didn't see things that way. They looked at, I almost hate to say this because people, they love the quote DEI. They love and I'm going to get on my soapbox here. They'll say, oh, they're a DEI hire. What are you basing that off? Race? Because if you are, then you're no good than anybody else. That's the reality. And we had back in the day, back in the 1980s, we had gay police, we had female police, we had Muslims, we had Jews, we had blacks, we had whites, and no one cared. No one cared.
And we had the same thing. I had, in the detective bureau, I had, it was a Jewish guy who had been a Marine.
Right.
And he said his family never understood why he did all this, but he wanted to serve.
Right.
And you look at that, and a funny part about like going and doing the backgrounds, and they would get into the academy, the females actually would shoot better on the range.
Right.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
They didn't have all the bad habits, the gunslinger habits that guys have that think they can fire from the instructors. They would learn how to do it the right way.
Right. Well, I never handled guns until they got in the police academy, and I was a really good shot because I was easy. They said that because they didn't have to train out bad habits. You
got trained out. In fact, I hired the first female officer, if I remember correctly. There, they came onto the department. So I did her background. And I ended up, I think, marrying another officer, which is not unusual, by the way. You work together and you get to know each other.
Right.
So within that, the laterals, when you bring in somebody as a sergeant from, Howard County or Detroit, and the training is entirely different. Now he's a sergeant in your department, and not only did you not match in culture and background, but it took away a sergeant's position because, as I'm sure you're aware, there's X number of positions to get promoted.
Right. It did. And the ones who were high on the list, they got passed over because someone was brought in as a sergeant from elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you look at that, and you go there. One of the fellows I did the background we'll talk about was, and it kind of got me where I am today with running this company, is Mark Murphy.
Tell us about Mark.
Mark was a terrific guy, very clean background. Everybody says, well, you know all about me now. No, I don't actually remember most of it. In fact, I went to a reunion not too long ago of retired police officers, and one guy said, you did my background, and I didn't remember. You do a lot of backgrounds, you look at it a lot of different, but Mark was really clean, did a great job, and was hired and came on. And he was doing a search warrant with after he was hired. And when he went to do the search warrant, he got hit by friendly fire. We raised up when somebody drew a gun and was firing from inside the apartment. And I believe that's how it occurred. And he was killed with friendly fire. And that was really sad. And they made him, I think they promoted him to sergeant after he was deceased. But I looked at that, and I looked at the other officers in the company I have now. I said, okay, we can help, if not only with their medical information, but contact the family. There's nothing worse than seeing something on the television from a helicopter shot with a guy laying on 5th and Jones Street and in the city, and your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or husband knows that's where you're working in that beat, and you're down and officer shot.
And what happens traditionally nowadays, especially for a lot of survivors I've had on, is they may start making phone calls, and when their loved one doesn't answer the phone call, then they're even worse. They don't know if they're involved or not, but it creates the anxiety. We're talking with Gary Parrish. Gary is a former Prince George's County, Maryland police officer, did 10 years, and he was heavily involved in background investigations. We'll continue to talk about in a few moments, especially that of Mark Murphy. And now he is a representative for HD Barcode LLC and HD Life Preserver for first responders. Their website is hdbarcode.com. That's hdbarcode.com. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We're going to talk more about how close it became to Mark, the after effects, and more. Don't go anywhere. I promise you. We'll be right back.
Get your free ebook on tips to improve your health. They are tips you can start using today, and most will cost you nothing. Plus, the ebook is 100% free. Download the free ebook at lethealthy.com. When we say free, we mean free. Get the ebook for free today at lethealthy.com. That's at lethealthy.com. Again, the website is lethealthy.com.
Return conversation with Gary Parrish on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Gary is a former Prince George's County, Maryland police officer, did 10 years and left the agency, which I don't know if I have time to discuss why he left. He did background investigations, one of them being Mark Murphy, who's kind of line of duty. And now he is one of the movers and shakers for HD Barcode LLC and HD Life Preserver for first responders. Their website is hdbarcode.com. That's hdbarcode.com. Gary, I had an episode I did a long time ago with a guy named Gary that was an East Side Baltimore cop, and we talked about a police officer named Vincent Adolfo who was shot and killed in the line of duty by a guy I won't mention, but I had arrested the same guy less than a year before for a handgun violation, and he's supposed to be in prison. He wasn't. He was driving a stolen car, leaving traffic court. And he shot and killed someone. And I believe he was the second to last person executed in the state of Maryland. But it took me, even though I didn't know Vincent personally, I had a connection with this guy, and it made it really, really even more difficult than, I hate to say this, than other line of duty deaths.
Yeah, it is difficult because you can remember bringing them, and then you start thinking and second-guessing yourself because Mark wasn't the only one. There were several others that I did who were killed in the line of duty. And you look at it and you say, did I pick the right guy? Did I make a mistake? What would he have been doing now? Did I take it away from his family? So you carry some guilt with you.
Yeah. I was going to ask that. How guilty did you feel?
That you care about it, and you got him into that job, you got him hired, and he's no longer with us or his family. He had 2 daughters. Mark had a perfect record, as far as I understand, in the police department afterwards. I left after the 10 years, actually because of the Justice Department. They changed my job from the detective to put me back in patrol. And I said, I'm a detective.
Right.
I can eat in privacy.
Yeah.
And so I said, no, this is this opportunity. Had another opportunity, got involved with high tech and imaging systems and barcode scanners and stuff like that. But Mark was there's nothing you can say bad about about his qualifications and what he did. He was clean.
Did you meet
easy.
those guys before you started the background investigation? Did you have a face-to-face with them?
Well, yeah, and it was a procedure that back then was pretty straightforward. They would fill out an application, they would come in, and we'd actually do a number of interviews. We keep records on the interviews. We would then go out. Of course, we needed information about his family, his husband, wife, kids, parents, grandparents, church. Anything he needed, anything that would help us get more information. And, you could find out a lot, sometimes ex-girlfriends, gives you information that you wouldn't probably want to know sometimes.
Right.
So you get a lot of different things for the applicant. And that's just the first part. The second part, of course, they're going to, whether it's a polygraph, after you do the background, they still have to go before a board. To be hired. They have to take a written test they have to pass, of course, at the beginning. And they go before the police officers, commanders board, and there's 4 or 5 commanding officers in there, and they talk to him. But before he comes in or she comes in, they would ask me, should we hire him or not? That was the question. Yeah. They would just leave it on to the investigator, say, are we bringing on the right person?
I'm sure they left the responsibility to you because if I know police brass, and I don't always think of them fondly, they are very good at eluding responsibility.
Yeah, that's how they got there.
That's exactly how they got there.
That's a joke, but it's kind of a... Yeah.
So the question is, and I get why you didn't want to go back to patrol. I understand that. And I always say this very simply. Detectives usually work Monday through Friday, usually have weekends off, usually work day work. Then you've got the uniform patrol thing. It's rotating days off, rotating shift work, rotating all that stuff. And by the way, you've got a target on your back all the time, 24/7.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem you run into, because I don't know if Baltimore did that, but Prince George back then, they changed it now, I find out. And I am still in contact with one of the district commanders on a regular basis. We have lunch when I'm up there. And he was part of the process of the new things we were trying to do. But, that 7-day on, 2 days off, 7 days, 3 to 11, 1 day off, 7 days midnight, it was, 4 days off. By the time you're going through that 21-day cycle, you're pretty cranky.
Yeah, very cranky. And very stressed out. And they've shown that it shortens your lifespan. Crazy. Here's the other thing. We used to change every 28 days. And eventually when I was on the job still, we got a permanent midnight shift that was volunteer only. But what would happen was we would change the midnight shift, and then we'd have court the next day. And you get off work at 7 or 8 in the morning, depending on which district you're at, and you could be in court till 11, 12 o'clock, go home, be wide awake at that point, and when you're in court, you're sequestered. You're not even allowed to be in the courtroom itself. So it was tiring, very tiring.
Well, I kind of related it to the ministry. I mean, this is a calling. Between work, and then you'll get in the detective bureau, you'll get a call at night. We've arrested this guy.
Right.
You got a warrant out for, and you need to come in and interview him. You need to get the paperwork ready for the court. Then you got to sit in there on your day off, and it became almost a 7-day-a-week job, which doesn't do well for marriages for a lot of the guys.
And I'll tell you a funny story of me working midnight shift when I was a rookie cop in Baltimore at Liberty Heights and Garrison Boulevard. It was a red light and was waiting for the shift change call, and I fell asleep in a patrol car at a red light, driving an old Pontiac, and someone came. You know how you incorporate stuff in your dreams you hear? There's car horns blowing. There are people behind me. They're blocked. This guy tapped the window. You okay? I'm like, oh. I realized I fell asleep at the wheel, William Park, and I took off.
Yeah, it's very easy to do it, and some people look at that. I know that I don't know the term they use in a lot of departments. They used to have 82s, signal 82s, where you'd meet with an officer at midnights, and you hadn't had maybe an hour or 2 hours sleep, and you say, "I need to close my eyes."
Right.
for safety.
Exactly
and he would watch out for you and listen out for you to make sure you were all right. And somebody came up and say, "Oh, you're sleeping on the job."
That's a different story for a different day. Gary, I want to go into what you're doing today. HD Barcode LLC and HD Life Preserver for First Responders. What is that?
Well, what we do now is we provide the most advanced 2D code in the world, HD barcode. Whereas a QR code, everybody knows, they can put about 3,000 characters in. We can put 704,000. We are instead of a messenger where you send data, which anybody can copy and create phishing sites, we are a data carrier. So I can put all your medical records and all your emergency contacts in the code itself. It only stays with the officer or the agent. And there is no database. There is no, have to look up. So they can have all the numbers, and it goes on a Tesla. And we've been working with PPG Industries. Tesla's a waterproof material that goes on like oil cans and outside.
Right.
So it goes on your ID card. You can put it on a ID tag. You can put it on the vehicle or on a notepad. And so we created that, and it makes it easy for the supervisor. For instance, they have to have an authorization code for each agency to be able to read that code. Or they can have the app on there. They don't need to go on the Internet at all. So each one is done individually for each department. So the protection's there to do that. Since that time, I've been working with different agencies for autism, for Alzheimer's, for seniors, for people that are visually impaired. So we can do that, and we don't have to have certain information on there, so it doesn't have to be a private app where we won't violate HIPAA violations.
Right.
So it's really nice, and it's on a label, so it's inexpensive. And if something changes, we have a little form you fill out. It makes the code, and it goes away, and it stays with the officer, which is nice. So at 3 a.m. in the morning, and you want to reach somebody, it's not always easy if you don't have their that number for your spouse. So it becomes important. So we've been working on that, and we just finished up part where we're putting it on your foods and drugs, so it puts the entire directions for use, so people that can't read that small 3-point type. So those are the things we're working on. I've been getting a lot of cooperation from a number of departments and individuals into those departments to help with it. So that's where we are with it.
And the website is hdbarcode.com. Am I correct?
That is correct.
And can people reach you there and get more information about your products and contact you there?
Absolutely. Or they can call our office, and we'd be glad to help them. And we're always looking for new suggestions. Like one of the commanders said, I want to know if my officers are going into the 7-Elevens. Can they scan a code?
Yes, they are. Gary, thanks so much for being a guest on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, John Jay. Take care.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.
When people turn to telehealth for weight loss, they're looking for real support. That's why more people are choosing OrderlyMeds.com. Orderly Meds connects you with real doctors and access to proven GLP-1 medications like semaglutide and tirzepatide. No guessing, just a more supportive experience, and all shipped directly to your door in discreet packaging. Do your research, ask questions, then visit OrderlyMeds.com/podcast for an exclusive offer. That's OrderlyMeds.com/podcast. Individual results may vary, not medical advice. Eligibility required. See site for details.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.